Linda is a homemaker who once had ambitions and dreams of her own, but put them aside to support her family and maintain their home. Despite her efforts to create a comfortable life for her family, she feels a deep sense of emotional unfulfillment and isolation. Charismatic and socially active, Linda is seen as the epitome of a devoted wife and mother. However, beneath her polished exterior lies a growing sense of dissatisfaction. She feels neglected in her marriage and is increasingly drawn to finding solace outside her home. Linda is attractive and maintains her appearance meticulously. Her outward charm hides her inner turmoil. Her behavior becomes erratic and unpredictable as she seeks out excitement and validation through her secret affair with Mark. Richard is a successful businessman who has devoted much of his life to building his career. His dedication to his work has created financial stability for his family, but it has also led to emotional distance within the family. Richard is pragmatic and focused, often prioritizing work over personal relationships. His preoccupation with his career has made him somewhat detached and inattentive to his family's emotional needs. He is well-groomed and carries himself with confidence. Richard's busy schedule and emotional distance contribute to a strained relationship with Linda as he fails to notice or address her growing dissatisfaction. Mark, Richard's son from a previous marriage, has recently moved back in with his father and stepmother after completing college. Although he is well-educated and charming, he struggles with his place in the Turner household. Mark is charismatic and capable of charming those around him. However, he feels out of place and uncertain about his role in the family. His return home is marked by a sense of awkwardness and rebellion against the perceived constraints of family life. Mark is attractive and self-assured, but his internal conflict manifests as occasional aloofness and defiance. His charm masks a deeper sense of disconnection and frustration, which becomes a catalyst for his secret affair with Linda. Emma is Linda and Richard's teenage daughter. She is perceptive and sensitive, often picking up on subtle changes in her family's dynamics. Her age places her in a crucial position to observe the shifting relationships within her home. Emma is intuitive and emotionally astute. She is caught between adolescence and adulthood, struggling to understand and process the complex emotions she experiences as she witnesses her family's unraveling. Emma presents as a typical teenager, but her observant nature sets her apart. She is often seen withdrawn or conflicted, reflecting her inner turmoil as she grapples with her mother's secretive behavior and its impact on the family. Linda and Mark's initial interactions are framed within the context of typical family gatherings, such as dinner or weekend outings. These moments are portrayed as innocent and familial, with Linda and Mark discussing topics related to Mark's future, like his career plans or academic interests. Their conversations start to include more personal topics, with Linda offering advice and expressing interest in Mark's goals. Mark, in turn, shows appreciation for Linda's attention and understanding, which contrasts with his strained relationship with his father, Richard. As they interact more, Linda and Mark's conversations become increasingly flirtatious. Linda's compliments about Mark's appearance or achievements start to have a more personal undertone. Mark's responses become more appreciative, and he begins seeking Linda's approval and attention more frequently. Their relationship begins to cross boundaries as they find excuses to spend time alone together. They might go on outings or have private conversations under the pretext of discussing personal issues or seeking advice. The flirtation progresses to physical contact. It might start with innocent touches or lingering hugs, which soon evolve into more intimate gestures. The emotional and physical tension builds as both Linda and Mark become increasingly attracted to each other. Linda and Mark arrange secret meetings away from the family home, such as in parks or rented spaces. These meetings are characterized by passionate and intimate exchanges, solidifying their affair. Linda becomes increasingly emotionally dependent on Mark. Her obsession with their relationship starts to interfere with her daily life. She spends hours texting or calling Mark and becomes preoccupied with thoughts of him. Neglect of responsibilities. Linda's focus on the affair leads to neglect of her household duties and family responsibilities. She starts missing important family events or being inattentive to her husband and daughter. The home environment becomes increasingly disordered, reflecting her inner turmoil. Linda's behavior becomes unpredictable. She might have sudden outbursts of anger or mood swings, particularly when Mark is unavailable or expresses doubts about their relationship. Her erratic behavior raises concern among family members. Mark begins to feel the weight of the secret and the consequences of their actions. The initial excitement of the affair starts to wane, replaced by guilt and anxiety. He begins to question the sustainability of their relationship and its impact on his family and personal life. Mark starts distancing himself from Linda, both physically and emotionally. He becomes less responsive to her calls or messages and starts avoiding their secret meetings. His withdrawal creates tension between them, with Linda reacting with frustration and desperation. During their interactions, Mark starts expressing doubts about their future together. He might voice concerns about the ethical implications of their affair and the potential for exposure, increasing Linda's anxiety and sense of instability. Emma becomes increasingly aware of Linda's odd behavior, such as unexplained absences or sudden changes in routine. She notices her mother's emotional distance and erratic behavior, which contrasts sharply with her usual demeanor. Emma's curiosity leads her to investigate further. She might come across hidden messages on Linda's phone, such as incriminating texts or photos between Linda and Mark. Emma's discovery creates a sense of betrayal and confusion. Emma struggles with the decision of whether to confront Linda or keep the secret. Her growing suspicion and the evidence she has gathered create a significant emotional burden. Richard starts to feel the emotional distance between himself and Linda. He notices her growing disinterest in family activities and her increasing irritability. Although he suspects something is wrong, he is unsure of the cause. Richard may come across indirect evidence of Linda's behavior, such as unexplained absences or inconsistencies in her stories. These observations contribute to his growing concern and unease. As the distance between him and Linda widens, Richard becomes anxious about the state of their marriage. His attempts to address the issue with Linda are met with evasive or defensive responses, deepening his suspicion and frustration. Emma notices subtle changes in her mother's behavior: late-night phone calls, secretive texts, and unexplained absences. She also sees Linda's emotional detachment from the family. One day, while Linda is out, Emma borrows Linda's phone to check the time and accidentally comes across a series of explicit messages between Linda and Mark. The messages reveal intimate conversations and plans to meet. Emma finds saved photos on the phone, including intimate selfies and images of Mark and Linda together in places they had claimed to visit separately. Overwhelmed and conflicted, Emma grapples with the shock and betrayal of discovering the affair. She feels a mix of anger, hurt, and confusion. Emma confronts Linda at home, choosing a private and tense moment, such as when Richard is out of the house. The confrontation occurs in a charged atmosphere, with Emma's emotions running high. Emma shows Linda the messages and photos, demanding an explanation. Linda initially tries to deflect and deny the affair, insisting that the evidence is misleading or taken out of context. As Emma's anger grows, Linda's denial turns into desperation. She pleads with Emma to keep quiet, promising to fix the situation and claiming that their family will be destroyed if the truth comes out. Linda's pleading creates a rift, as Emma feels betrayed and uncertain about her next steps. Emma becomes increasingly withdrawn, avoiding her mother and isolating herself from family activities. She struggles to maintain normal interactions and becomes distant in her conversations. Emma and Linda engage in frequent arguments, with Linda trying to maintain a facade of normalcy and Emma expressing her anger and disillusionment. These arguments become heated and emotionally charged, further straining their relationship. Emma wrestles with the decision of whether to reveal the affair to her father. She is torn between protecting her family's image and exposing the truth. Emma seeks advice from friends or a trusted adult who might encourage her to come clean. The weight of the secret begins to feel unbearable. Richard notices Linda's increasingly erratic behavior, such as unexplained absences and unusual phone calls. He becomes more observant and starts connecting the dots. Richard confronts Linda about her behavior, asking for honest explanations. Linda offers various excuses: stress from work, health issues, or personal problems, but her explanations become less convincing. Richard's persistent questioning leads to intense arguments. Linda's defensive and evasive responses only fuel Richard's suspicions. He begins to question her loyalty and honesty, causing further tension in their marriage. Richard might find minor inconsistencies or pieces of evidence, such as misplaced items or suspicious phone bills, that add to his doubts. Mark feels trapped by the secrecy and the emotional turmoil caused by the affair. He is overwhelmed by the guilt and stress of living a double life and decides that ending the relationship is the only solution. Mark arranges a meeting with Linda, where he informs her of his decision to end the affair. The conversation is filled with tension and raw emotions. Linda reacts with anger and desperation. She tries to persuade Mark to stay, arguing that they can find a way to make things work. The confrontation is heated, with Linda expressing her fears about the affair being exposed and the consequences it will have on their lives. Despite Linda's pleas, Mark remains resolute about ending the relationship. He emphasizes his desire to move on and insists that there is no future for them together. Linda is devastated by Mark's decision, fearing the affair will be exposed and her life will unravel. She becomes increasingly desperate to keep the secret and salvage her family's reputation. Manipulation: Linda might try to manipulate or coerce Mark into staying, using emotional appeals or threats. She could also attempt to control the situation by making Mark's life difficult or threatening him with consequences. Linda becomes isolated, feeling that her world is collapsing. Her desperation leads her to take drastic measures, including trying to cover up the affair or taking steps to prevent Mark from revealing the truth. Linda, feeling a sense of desperation and urgency, decides to meet Mark for a final conversation. She chooses a secluded location to avoid being seen, reflecting her intent to keep the meeting private. The chosen spot is an old, abandoned building on the outskirts of town, a place they had previously used for their secret meetings. It's isolated, with broken windows and an eerie silence that adds to the tension. Linda prepares for the meeting with a mixture of hope and anxiety. She carries a bag with her, which contains a knife she brought for self-defense purposes, given her increasing fear of losing Mark and the potential exposure of their affair. Argument. Linda arrives at the location first, nervously waiting for Mark. She paces back and forth, her mind racing with thoughts of how to persuade him to stay. Mark's arrival. Mark shows up, his demeanor cold and resolute. He has already made up his mind about ending the affair, feeling that it's the only way to resolve the turmoil in his life. Linda approaches Mark with a mixture of affection and desperation. She tries to rekindle their relationship by expressing her love and promising to make changes in her life. Her pleas are filled with emotion as she reminisces about their past moments together. Mark, however, remains firm in his decision. He argues that their relationship is damaging and that continuing it would only lead to more pain. He expresses his regret, but insists that they must part ways to avoid further complications. As the argument intensifies, Linda's desperation turns to anger. She feels cornered and betrayed, unable to accept Mark's rejection. Her emotional state deteriorates as she realizes that her attempts to save the relationship are failing. In a moment of heightened agitation, Linda reaches into her bag and pulls out the knife she had brought with her. The weapon's presence escalates the confrontation from a verbal argument to a physical altercation. She wields it with trembling hands, driven by a mix of rage, jealousy, and fear. Mark's death. The argument erupts into violence. Linda, in a blind fit of anger, attacks Mark with the knife. The struggle is chaotic, marked by shouting, frantic movements, and the clattering of objects as they fall during the scuffle. Mark's fatal wounds. Mark is injured fatally during the attack. The specifics of the wounds are severe, leaving him bleeding and incapacitated. His attempts to defend himself are in vain as Linda's rage overwhelms him. After the attack, Linda is left in a state of shock and horror. The reality of what she has done begins to sink in. She stares at Mark's lifeless body, overcome with a mix of guilt, regret, and disbelief. The secluded setting, once a place of secret meetings and stolen moments, now becomes the scene of a tragic and violent crime. This detailed account of the climax delves into the emotions and actions of Linda and Mark during their final confrontation, highlighting the escalation of the argument and the subsequent murder. It provides a vivid portrayal of the critical moment when Linda's emotional turmoil leads to irreversible consequences. After the murder, Linda is in a state of shock and panic. She takes a few moments to gather herself and evaluate the situation. Realizing the gravity of her actions, she decides to stage the scene to avoid suspicion. Linda arranges Mark's body in a way that makes it look like a tragic accident. She might drag his body to a nearby ravine or place it in a position that suggests he fell or was attacked by a wild animal. Linda scrambles to remove any evidence that could link her to the crime. She cleans up bloodstains or other physical evidence using cleaning supplies she brought along. She wipes down any surfaces she touched and tries to remove or destroy the weapon used in the murder. To mislead investigators, Linda might place items around the scene that suggest a struggle or an attack by an unknown assailant. For example, she could scatter Mark's belongings or leave behind a torn piece of clothing to create the appearance of a violent encounter. Linda carefully plans her alibi for the time of the murder. She ensures that she has witnesses or proof of her presence elsewhere, such as a fake phone call or text messages, to establish that she was not near the crime scene. Mark's body is discovered by passerby or police after a report of a missing person. The authorities are notified, and the scene is secured for investigation. The police arrive at the scene and begin their investigation. They examine the body, look for clues, and interview potential witnesses. Linda is contacted and questioned as a family member and potential witness. Linda's behavior is notably strained and anxious during the investigation. She provides a carefully crafted statement about her whereabouts and any interactions with Mark. Despite her attempts to appear cooperative, her nervousness and inconsistencies in her story raise red flags for the detectives. The police gather forensic evidence, including fingerprints, DNA, and any other physical evidence. They also look into Linda's background, relationships, and any potential motives for the murder. Emma struggles with a deep sense of guilt and fear about revealing her knowledge. She feels torn between protecting her mother and doing what is morally right. The weight of knowing the truth about the affair and the murder creates immense psychological pressure. Emma debates whether to come forward with what she knows. She considers the potential consequences for her family and her own well-being. The internal conflict intensifies as she witnesses the ongoing investigation and the strain it puts on her family. Revelation. After much soul-searching, Emma decides to confide in a trusted adult, such as a school counselor or family friend, about the affair and her mother's suspicious behavior. This decision is driven by a sense of justice and the need to alleviate her own guilt. Emma provides crucial evidence to the authorities, including text messages, photos, or any other information that confirms her mother's affair with Mark. She also shares details about the timing of the affair and any other suspicious activities she observed. Emma's testimony leads to a breakthrough in the investigation. The police re-examine the evidence, linking it to Linda. They use Emma's information to corroborate their findings and build a stronger case against Linda. This detailed section explores Linda's attempts to cover up the murder and Emma's emotional journey from internal conflict to revealing the truth. It provides a comprehensive look at the unfolding events and their impact on the investigation and family dynamics. The case garners widespread media attention, with news outlets running sensational headlines about the mother-son affair and the shocking murder. News programs and newspapers extensively cover the story, focusing on the salacious details of the affair and the dramatic nature of the murder. Live updates and exclusive interviews with neighbors, friends, and experts keep the public engaged. The affair and murder spark intense public interest and debate. Online forums and social media platforms buzz with speculation, outrage, and support for various sides of the case. Photographers and journalists camp outside the courthouse, capturing every moment of the trial. The media's relentless coverage amplifies the case's drama and impacts public perception. The prosecution presents compelling evidence of premeditation. They show text messages, photos, and other digital evidence proving the ongoing affair between Linda and Mark. Witness testimonies. Key witnesses include Emma, who testifies about discovering the affair and her mother's suspicious behavior, and forensic experts who detail the nature of Mark's injuries. The prosecution argues that Linda's actions were driven by jealousy and manipulation. They emphasize that Linda had the opportunity and motive to commit murder, portraying her as calculating and dangerous. The prosecution's closing argument stresses that Linda's behavior leading up to the murder, her attempts to cover it up and manipulate the crime scene, demonstrates a clear intent to avoid consequences, reinforcing the argument for premeditation. Linda's defense argues that she was suffering from severe emotional distress and mental instability. They present psychological evaluations and expert testimonies to support claims of Linda's compromised mental state. The defense calls character witnesses, including friends and family, who testify about Linda's previously good nature and the pressures she faced in her life and marriage. The defense portrays Linda as a victim of her circumstances, overwhelmed by the affair and its consequences. They argue that Linda's mental state led her to act irrationally in a moment of intense emotional upheaval. Closing argument. The defense's closing argument focuses on Linda's emotional turmoil and the lack of premeditation. They argue that while Linda's actions were tragic, they were a result of an emotional breakdown rather than deliberate intent to kill. The jury deliberates over the evidence and arguments presented by both sides. They must weigh the prosecution's case of premeditation against the defense's claim of mental instability. Jurors ask questions about the evidence, Linda's mental health, and the circumstances of the murder. They discuss the implications of Linda's actions and the emotional and psychological context. Final verdict. The jury delivers its verdict. If they find Linda guilty, the verdict is based on the premeditation and emotional manipulation demonstrated by the prosecution. If they find her not guilty, it's likely due to the defense's successful argument of mental instability and emotional distress. If Linda is found guilty, the judge sentences her, according to the law, potentially life imprisonment or a lengthy sentence based on the severity of the crime and the premeditation involved. The verdict prompts reactions from the public and media. Reactions vary from outrage and disappointment to sympathy and understanding, reflecting the complex emotions surrounding the case.